Lawyer. Good afternoon, Crime Talk aficionados. This is breaking news, so we thought we'd break in live and talk about it. Pretty big, significant change of circumstance in the Bryan Kohberger case, wouldn't you say? Apparently, the defense didn't quite work out as proposed, but the defense ultimately got what they want. Remember, I've told you in the past, death is different. Ann Taylor said that all along. Death is different. Death is different. And they were pulling out all their, all their shots, so to speak, to try and make the death penalty go away. I kept telling everybody, if you watch the litigation of this case, it's always about the death penalty. The prosecutors usually don't go forward with the death penalty unless they believe they have a very strong case that they can win. But the one unknown normally with a death penalty case is if you get one juror, right? It has to be unanimous for death. And if it doesn't go unanimous for death, you spend all that time going to trial, all those additional resources, all the appeals for the next 30 years. And what do you get? You possibly get no death, right? So a guilty plea is certainty. A guilty plea is certainty for the prosecution. It's also certainty for the defendant, apparently Bryan Kohberger, as it is being reported by many, many news services that he is going to plead guilty. And in exchange for his pleas of guilty, he will be spared the death penalty and that he will get life without the possibility of parole, ladies and gentlemen. Now, obviously, the prosecution has the ultimate decision-making authority in that. But remember, there's 4 families involved, right? You got Madison Mogen's family, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle's family. And apparently the Gonzalez family is not happy. In fact, they have said that they condemned the deal, which spares Kohberger his life. And they said, quote, "We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho." This is according to their own Facebook page. "They," referring to the prosecution, "have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected." I agree. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, if we go back to the Christopher Watts case, the man that killed his wife, 2 young daughters, and that was also a death penalty case. And remember one day they said, "Oh, there's going to be a hearing scheduled for tomorrow." It wasn't set for a preliminary hearing or something. And I said, "Oh, I bet there's going to be a guilty plea." Now, Frank has reminded me before we came on the air this evening that I apparently said that this is ultimately what will happen. They'll go through, they'll litigate the case. I can't remember exactly when I said it, but it doesn't surprise me because that's the case. It is a death penalty case. The goal in the death penalty case is to avoid the felony conviction. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I had one case, one death penalty case in my time as a defense attorney, and we were able to convince the district attorney not to go death, but we ultimately went to trial, and, well, they had some pretty well overwhelming evidence. What was there? Oh, that pesky DNA. Ooh, pesky DNA. And I think, I always said at the beginning of this case, the problem for Kohberger in this particular case is the DNA. Everybody said, "Oh, don't worry." Not everybody, but a lot of people said, "Oh, there's nothing to worry about with DNA." And I guarantee you the defense was worried about it. Why do you think the defense tried so hard to get rid of the DNA, right? I told you, look at the motions that are being filed. What evidence are they trying to get rid of? That tells you what the defense perceives as a problem for their case. And some people, "Oh, it doesn't really matter. It's only no, it's his DNA." So ultimately, now, and here's the other thing. Obviously, the prosecution makes this ultimate decision. And normally under most victims' rights acts type of situations, the families should be consulted. But guess what? The family doesn't have the ultimate say as to what the plea disposition will be. they have to be consulted. And I don't know if the prosecutors consulted the Gonsalves family, because apparently the Gonsalves family is quite upset. And they said, it's true. We're beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They failed us. Please give us some time. This was unexpected. We appreciate your love and support. Like I said, I'm not going to say I'm an expert on the Victims' Rights Acts, but the Victim Rights Acts that I've had to deal with in both state and federal court, victims need to be consulted. Doesn't mean that they hold veto power over any plea bargain, because obviously the prosecutor is in the best situation to assess their case. And this provides certainty. I know the Gonsalves family doesn't like it, assuming this all goes through. Now, remember, nothing's done until the government accepts, nothing is done until the judge accepts the plea. And so they're going to come into court, and there's going to be an advisement, a colloquy, an exchange between the judge and Mr. Kohberger. And something important, I hopefully will take place. I hope this takes place. Judge, if you're listening, prosecutors, if you're listening, I hope this takes place. At any sort of guilty plea, there's usually some paperwork that the prosecutor has prepared. Defense counsel has reviewed it with their client, and it has the plea agreement, right? Plead guilty to counts 1 through 5, 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of burglary. In exchange for that, prosecution will not pursue the death penalty. Okay? Judge says, is this your understanding of the agreement? No side agreements, no hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that type of situation. Nope. That's it. All right. Then the judge has to explain, do you understand the rights that you have to go to a trial? And a good judge will explain those rights to the defendant, where he's thinking, man, why would I want to give up all these cool rights? They do it particularly in federal court. They're like, man, this is so cool, because if you persist in your plea of not guilty, we're going to have a jury trial here in August. All right? We're going to have a jury trial here in August. And guess what? You're going to get to assist your attorney in selecting a jury. And at a trial, the prosecution always has to prove you guilty. But you're given the presumption of innocence, and that presumption of innocence will remain with you, Mr. Kohberger, unless and until you plead guilty, obviously here, or you go to trial and the prosecution proves the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, do you understand, at trial, you get to confront and cross-examine all witnesses that come and testify against you through the assistance of your attorney, obviously. Yep. Do you understand that you don't have to present any evidence in your own defense? It's not your job to prove yourself guilty, but that the prosecution must prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Yes, I do. He'll have to respond. The judge will then ask him, do you understand, did you have a right to testify? It's an absolute right. It's a very personal right, individual right, that you can testify or not testify, and it's your decision. Neither your attorneys, the prosecutor, the judge, family, nobody can convince you to testify. And you don't have to make that decision until you've heard all of the evidence in this particular case. Do you understand that? Yes, I do. And I'll say, do you understand that the rights that you have, except for your right to an attorney, which will continue through sentencing, you give up all of those rights other than your right to attorney if you plead guilty. So all those motions that you filed and all those potential appellate issues, they all go away. Do you understand that? Do you understand there'll be no jury? There'll be no making the prosecution prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that no witnesses will come and testify? Do you understand no evidence will have to be presented? You're not going to have to make a decision whether you present a defense or not, whether you testify or not, because all that's going away if the judge accepts his guilty plea. And it has to be a knowing voluntary waiver. So the judge will inquire and say, are you under the influence of any drugs, alcohol, or medication? No, I am not. Are you thinking clearly here today? You heard the plea agreement. Do you understand what the plea agreement means? Do you have any questions? Have you had enough time to talk with your attorney about the proposed plea agreement? Are you satisfied with the advice and representation of your attorney? And that's one of those, you kind of speak now or forever hold your peace thing, but they always try to attack it anyway. And he'll presumably say, yes, I am. Now, this is, before I get to the good stuff, the judge will also say, you understand the maximum penalty here. Do you understand the maximum penalty, which is life without the possibility of parole, probably be consecutive, plus throw in that burglary charge, and there you go, right? Judge says, yep, I understand it. You understand you're never getting out of prison. unless, of course, the law changes, the legislature changes their mind and says, people that commit quadruple homicides, they just having a bad day. Let's let you out after, 30 years or something. Going to prison for the rest of your life. Okay. Then the judge will do, and I hope this Judge Hippler, does this. I really hope he does this. They should have done this in the Chris Watts case that was just up the road here in Weld County years ago. The judge says, how do you plead guilty? Do you waive a factual basis? Yes or no? What the judge should have Bryan Kohberger do, stated on the record, is tell me in your own words what you did, right? Go through each and every one of them. You are charged with the killing of Madison Mogen. Tell me in your own words how you killed her. Judge says, okay, fine. I'll accept a plea as to Madison Mogen. And then he hopefully will say, tell me in your own words what you did to cause the death of Kayla Gonzalez. How about Xana Kernodle? And go through it. And Ethan Chapin. Boom, boom, boom. And have him state on the record that you did this. You. And that you acted alone. I don't know if we'll ever get a reason out of him. I really don't. Because there's really not, you can take a plea. Victims get to testify. The victims' families get to testify. How this has impacted them. Doesn't make a hill of beans of difference. He's going to get the mandatory life without the possibility of parole. Right? Like I said, this is all assuming the plea goes forward, ladies and gentlemen. It's all assuming the plea goes forward. But I hope that's what they do, because we found out in the Chris Watts case, they never said what he did. I mean, he said, I plead guilty, but he never said, I took the life of this individual. And I think that makes it clear so that the judge can say, I find a sufficient factual basis to accept the plea, but it also takes away any post-conviction challenge. Okay? And I think from what we've seen from this Judge Hippler, he doesn't play. He's going to engage in this colloquy with Mr. Kohberger when they get to court and they get to the change of plea hearing. And he's going to go through it. He's going to make sure that plea is bulletproof. So there is nothing that will come back on any sort of post-appellate conviction review down the road. So that will be a good thing. All right. So all this is happening today. I kept telling you, when there's a death penalty case, yes, the defense is trying to, come up with a defense, but death penalty cases are different, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about sparing the life of the defendant. I know several attorneys. We no longer have the death penalty here, but I knew several people that did more death penalty cases than I ever did, obviously. I only had one. And their goal was life. We'll do this to take death off the table. And, most people don't know this, but, most states up until like the 70s, early 70s, life meant like 30 years. It wasn't life without the possibility of parole. It was like 30 years. You get out in 30 years after, you're eligible for parole for that. It was the death penalty attorneys that basically made life without the possibility of parole. Hey, spare my client's life. He'll plead guilty to life without parole. Now, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Who here has ever been to jail? Okay, show of hands. I've visited lots of jails. Thank God I've never been arrested. But they're not pleasant places to be. Not at all. And I'm not sure how I would want to live my life as it relates to that. I don't know. Now, I remember there was the case of Timothy McVeigh. Obviously, he's the gentleman, one of the two that was convicted of blowing up the Oklahoma City Murray building down in Oklahoma City. They blew it up. Trial was moved to Denver. I think I was in law school during the time that was going on. I think it was like 95 or something like that, 94. Anyway, he ultimately got convicted, gets the death penalty for killing 200 some odd people. Ultimately, at one point, he gets Nathan Chambers, very good attorney, appellate attorney. His wife used to be the prosecutor down in Arapahoe County. But ultimately, even though they found like a bunch of documents that were never turned over, probably could have litigated that case from here to eternity, and he'd still be alive. But Timothy McVeigh was like, let's do this thing. And he got executed. I mean, within a very short amount of time. Now, I don't know about you. I mean, I guess you want to live, maybe, you know, your family, whatever. But the reality of it is that that's not how I'd want to live my life. Like I said, I've visited I visited ADX. I've been to FCIs, Canyon City. Been to a lot of, it's not a way you want to live the rest of your life, particularly if you're a 30-year-old individual. You can live a long time. Now, average life expectancy is what? I think 72 in prison. So he's got at least 40 some odd years in which to deal with that, but it's still a long, long time. So, Frank, did we get that call-in thing up?
No, I don't have the cable here.
Oh, we don't have it handy?
No. I'm still working on that.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're going to set up the call-in line, and we could hear what people had to say about what is apparently taking place. Now, the question is, when is it going to take place? There's nothing on the court's docket as of yet, but apparently the word is they're going to get this in sooner rather than later, which is a good thing to do, right? If everybody's agreed to it and, you know, you want the defendant to do it, you want to strike while the fire is hot, so to speak, and get him in there to engage in that colloquy. Okay, he's going to turn off the audio really quick here, ladies and gentlemen. So if you can't hear me for a very second, it's a test, all right? Because we're going to set up our call-in number where people can call in, and we can, you know, you can tell us if you think this is a good thing or if this is a bad thing. Tamsin says, wouldn't this be an Alford plea? Well, that's what I'm saying, Tamsin. I hope not. I hope the judge says, tell me in your own words. An Alford plea, you're still treated as guilty. But an Alford plea is basically saying, I'm not saying I did. I'm not saying I didn't, but I'll plead guilty to accept the consequences. Right? That's an Alford plea. But the reality of it is something like this, a death penalty case, it's not going to be an Alford plea. This judge should say, did you do this? And tell me in your own words. Because we don't want to, you know, taking a guilty plea of an innocent man just because he wants to avoid the death penalty, just because he got a little scared, right? Just because he got a little scared with the death penalty, he's going to wimp out and take a plea deal and then try to do something else. So the reality of it is that and, you know, basically have him walk through it, understand all his rights. You sure you want to do this, right? You sure? Trial will be pretty cool. It's going to be a cool thing for everybody involved, right? And you get to exercise all these constitutional rights. Wouldn't that be fun? Let's go do this thing. And then ultimately the judge should say, in your own words, tell me what you did. There was a judge in Denver, you know, he wouldn't take stipulated plea deals. When a stipulated plea deal is, you know, judge, he's going to plead guilty and you're going to impose the sentence. And the judge is like, what am I, a puppet? No, I will sentence people. He was a very good judge. He goes, that's my job. That's what I was appointed a judge to do. He wouldn't concurrent because a concurrent sentence, that particular judge did not think that you should get a volume discount for crime. It's not like you're going to Costco or something, right? And so ultimately, he would tell people, tell me in your own words what you did, because he didn't want to accept the plea of an innocent man. He didn't want somebody to plead guilty just to get out of jail. And people do that all the time. And some judges, you can do that, right? And it just depends on which courtroom you go to as to how the plea deal is done. But all right, let's kind of reset here as we're trying to set this up. The breaking news is, ladies and gentlemen, Bryan Kohberger is apparently going to plead guilty. Plead guilty in exchange for the death penalty to be dismissed. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. Or not to be dismissed, but just that they not pursue the death penalty. And so that is obviously quite significant for Bryan Kohberger, because he'll be able to be around for the, as much time as he has left remaining here, unlike his victims, so to speak, I think one could say. And obviously, let me just pull this up. All right. Oh, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. This, we don't usually save this. We usually save this for our Patreon, but this is big breaking news. So if you'd like to call in and let me know what you think, or let the rest of the world think of this particular breaking news of Bryan Kohberger apparently going to enter a plea of guilty to all counts in exchange for the prosecution not going forward to the death penalty, feel free to give us a call, 725-228-TALK, 725-228-8255. But only one thing. You got to listen to your phone and you got to turn the computer down, because there's a delay in the computer and the internet. Sounds silly. It's a really awkward conversation. So that's what you need to do. Those are the only rules. All right. And if you disagree with me, you get priority. All right.
Okay, we got Susan online.
All right, Susan, how are you doing? Susan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. So what are your thoughts on that Bryan Kohberger is going to accept a plea deal?
I think it was probably the smartest thing he could have done to avoid the death penalty, because I think after he saw all the evidence, he knew his goose was cooked, more or less. I still feel sorry for the families. I just hope he has to allocute in open court and that we all get to see. His parents, or the victim's parents, will never get all the answers that they want. And I personally think closure is just a joke. I don't think it's real. I don't think you ever truly get closure.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with anything that you just said. I mean, obviously, the victim's family, it doesn't just go away just because the case is closed.
Exactly.
And obviously, if there was going to be a death penalty, that would take probably another 30 years of appeals and challenges and things of that nature. And I understand the Gonzalez family. I understand the Gonzalez family is not probably happy, very upset. They want the death penalty. I get it. If that was my kid, I'd probably be saying the exact same thing too. But the prosecutor's got to look at it, and you just never know. All it takes is one juror to say life, and all that hard work, trials, everything. You get a wackadoo jury, it hangs, and you got to do it all over again. And, it's just, it can be a mess. So certainty is good for everybody, right? Kohberger pleads guilty.
100%.
Kohberger pleads guilty. He knows he doesn't get the death penalty. Prosecution gets a guilty plea. They know this guy will never get out of custody for the rest of his life.
Exactly. And as a former paralegal, I know that it's all trials. It's a numbers game, if you really stop and think about it, because it only takes one juror to hang. It only takes one juror to say life, not death.
Yep.
So this way, they have a conviction. And, when they get the death penalty, every so many years, appeal after appeal after appeal, it's like, for the families, it's like reopening that wound again and again and again and again.
Yep.
And they never, ever, ever get to heal.
Yep. No, I totally get it. And it's probably, I mean, it would be better if we all got to hear and see the evidence and people can decide, because there's a lot of people like, oh, I don't believe a word he said. I think he was just out driving, looking at the stars, and just completely ignore the evidence. Just completely ignore the evidence. So this is going to burst a lot of people's little bubbles that will probably not believe it.
Exactly. And as for the DNA, people saying what was planted. Well, how in the hell did they get his DNA in the first place? And why on earth would they pick this guy to set up. It makes no sense. But
Hey, I love a good conspiracy just as much as the next guy, but they're often difficult to prove, and because oftentimes it just didn't happen. Particularly when we're talking about a lone individual, But
exactly.
But it's one of those tough circumstances here, where I think at the end of the day this will probably be better, and hopefully the judge engages in that
I agree.
colloquy and says, "Tell me in your own words what you did to cause the death of each of these young individuals. How did you cause
That's all
the
I
death?"
want.
Yes, I want.
That's all I want is that public allocution. That's all I want.
Yep. And like I said, I'm a defense attorney. I love it. I love a good defense case. I love winning. Okay.
Mhm.
Nothing brings me more excitement as a defense attorney, right? That's why I do
Yes.
trial work. But if it's
Mhm.
not my case, I'm going to look at it objectively. All right. Even though I got to look at my case objectively, right? You're a paralegal. You worked with attorneys. You're constantly judging the weaknesses, the strengths of your case. And what about this? And what about? It's always constantly changing based upon new information that comes forward.
Mhm.
And, sometimes people just don't believe it. And that's just kind of very weird. And we saw this in the last couple of cases out there. Like, it's like we picked the team, and regardless of the facts, it doesn't matter because I picked the winning team or the losing team, and just going to ignore it. Right. I mean, it's just crazy. And so I want him to say, I did it. So for all the people,
and this is how I did it.
And I had nobody else involved with me. Or if there was somebody else involved with me, let's get them too, right? But that's not going to be the case.
Yes.
We all know that.
And I think a lot of people will want to know why. And we never get that answer, ever.
Yep.
Because people such as Bryan Kohberger, who psychopath, sociopath, whatever, the diagnosis is, we all know that these criminals like this always keep some secret for their own mental pleasure, basically.
Yep.
For their own reasons. So no one is ever going to know exactly why he did it. He did it because, in layman's terms, he's a nut job.
My guess
there's really a sane person would not do something like this.
I bet he'd say it was for the thrill of it. Hey, we got to take another call. Thank you so much for your call. Great call.
Have fun. Thanks.
Thank
Love
you.
your show, honey. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. And just real quick before we take our next call, a change of plea hearing will be Wednesday. So sometime Wednesday, there will be a change of plea hearing in the Bryan Kohberger matter, where he will, and it's anticipated that he will plead guilty to the deaths as well as the burglary of all of the victims in the case currently pending against him, where in exchange for those guilty pleas, the prosecution will no longer seek the death penalty, and they will recommend a life without the possibility of parole, which is pretty much true. All right. Who's next? Ross? Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Scott.
How are you?
I'm blown away right now. Been waiting for this trial forever. And I was wondering if you could tell me now, what about the gag order? Are they going to release like crime scene photos? I know that sounds gory, but like everything that happened, like we're all been sitting on the edge waiting to see what these kids went through. We know a little bit, but are we going to get that information now?
I would say yes, with one caveat. Kind of what happened in the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell trials. Normally, after a trial, it's basically subject to release. But the court can impose orders whereby they limit the release of photographs. But much more information will be available, and the gag order will be released, which means police officers, prosecutors, people intimately involved with this case can be able to speak freely about what they know. So
that's a good thing.
So that will be good.
Yeah, the crime scene photos wouldn't be really great for the family to, even, I'm sure they've seen them, but
Yeah.
for everybody else, I'm sure they didn't want them.
Yeah. And,
see all that.
at some
I don't-
point they will, but, I mean, it's, if you've ever seen
Yeah.
murder scenes, and we're not talking like, oh, there's, you can go on X if you want to see that stuff, or some other websites.
Right?
But,
Of course, yeah.
crime scenes are not a pretty scene. They should not be judged for, for entertainment value whatsoever.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping that because the families really don't need that. But I was wondering about the gag order and all the other information, all the testimonies that the police were going to give, all the everything else that we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it should go away.
Oh.
Should go away.
Okay, great, Scott. Well, you have a great day, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
doing what you do.
All right. Thank you for your call.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So quick reset. Scott, I think he pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. Yep. He chickened out. Assuming he pleads guilty, right? And assuming he's going to plead guilty to committing a quadruple homicide, that took some chutzpah, so to speak, right? But then he wimped out to actually have to sit there and face everybody in the world to see kind of what a horrible person he more than likely is. If he's, like I said, if he is pleading guilty to the quadruple murder, you're going down in, pretty small group there. Okay. We'll see. Someone asks, could the judge still give him the death penalty? Nope. They're taking that off the table. That's the plea bargain. Remember, we talked about it, the Apprende case. If you watch the show This Day in Legal History, I think it was last Thursday, the case of Apprende. Anything that would enhance the sentence has to be tried, proven to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Obviously, the sentencing enhancer of death is the ultimate sentencing enhancer, so only a judge could do that. In fact, Colorado years ago used to have a 3-judge panel decide whether a defendant got death, and the United States Supreme Court found that unconstitutional. So it has to be pled, proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and presented to a jury. And so if it's taken off the table, the only thing a judge will be able to do is to give consecutive sentences, right? For life without the possibility of parole, consecutive sentences, plus the burglary, before life sentences plus, 26 years, something along those lines. So yeah, like I said, big news. I didn't expect it. I was back in my office. I thought maybe there was a possibility, everything kind of been exhausted. And if they're going to do it, they're going to do it soon, right? Because trial's coming up. People got to start getting witnesses in, as we talked about today in today's show. There was a hearing today in Pennsylvania to get a bunch of witnesses there. And a lot of them didn't want to come to Idaho to testify and be perceived as being in support of Bryan Kohberger, even though they wouldn't be. They would just be a fact witness. But, bottom line is, this is a tough business, ladies and gentlemen. It really is. The defense, they're probably perceiving, we saved his life. We won. The prosecution saying, we got a conviction. We won. And they're constantly weighing what's going on, the strengths or weaknesses of the case. And every prosecutor's worst nightmare is, what if we get a wackadoo juror? We have overwhelming evidence and one juror hangs it. Or we go through that, we get a conviction, and one person got slipped through that won't impose the death penalty, or says, his mom didn't, breastfeed him enough when he was young. He's got this slight autistic thing going on. He's awkward. He was, didn't have a whole lot of friends. So maybe that doesn't justify, but explains how we got here kind of thing, right? It's possible. And they say life, and then you're right back where you are. Like I said, if you are a gambler, if you like uncertainty, you go to trial. Or if there's no offer, you go to trial. Or the offer sucks. You can get the same offer if you go to trial and lose, then you go to trial. But if you can't beat the offer, you want to be able to beat the offer, then you more than likely go there. All right, we got another call. Who do we have on the line?
Miller.
Miller? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm doing great.
So, this is kind of fun. It's been a long time. Been following your show for a very long time.
Well, thank
so
you.
I'm not sure how relevant this is, but when I first found out about the plea deal, it struck me that it was. I thought about the leaked information that appeared on, I think it was an episode of Dateline, if I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
and how
Yeah.
the information that the alleged evidence from the nearby FBI cell phone tower, and how that could, and I don't know if there was like concern that that might potentially lead to some sort of mistrial. And so I wondered if the prosecution might be more likely to try to make a deal if they felt that this leaked evidence, or I know they were investigating it and everything, if that could possibly have factors into it, in which case it just kind of really, it's very disheartening for me, because I often see news shows, not so much the YouTube news shows, but a lot of the mainstream media news shows, like they just get almost like too enmeshed in what's happening and so much into getting the real story that it just sort of puts the legal system in jeopardy. And I guess I wanted to get your perspective on this. And I know that we potentially would never find out what happened, but I would just be interested on how you're seeing sort of this come out.
I don't know if any of the leaked stuff had anything to do with the prosecution's position. The reality of it is, I mean, the prosecution holds the cards, right? I mean, they've got the better evidence. They've got the facts on their side, the law on their side, and they're supposed to win. That's why they're the prosecution. All the laws are written in favor of the prosecution. That's why being a defense attorney is such a tough job. And so I don't think that the prosecution entered into this plea as a position of weakness, that somehow they thought they would lose. But there's always those weird things. Like I said, you want certainty, go to trial. You want certainty, you take a plea deal. So I truly believe it was probably a lot of groveling. And we've talked about this. I mean, in a death penalty case, you take your best shot, you have your little mitigation meeting, and you go in there and you give them their pitch, so to speak. But in the meantime, and that's no doubt, I mean, everything that the defense has asked for, we want to sanction, take death off the table, take death off the table, take death off the table. Okay. And I know some people are going to say, oh my God, Bryan Kohberger is so innocent. I'm sure he's being railroaded. He must be drugged. They've hallucinated, whatever. They don't take death penalty cases unless they think they're going to win them. Okay. But at some point they say, fine, let's just take the deal. Let's get that certainty. So I don't think any of the leaks had anything to do with it. The defense is the one that's been asking for this, literally begging for this, trying to get this at every juncture. Judge is a sanction. Dismiss the death penalty. Judge is a sanction for not turn over discovery. Dismiss the death penalty. That's what they wanted. You can always look at their prayer for relief. What they want is just like the motions that the defense files, right? What is the bad evidence in our case? We need to come up with a reason to try to get that evidence to be suppressed, to be excluded through a motion in limine somehow. And everywhere along the line, the defense motions for their prayer for relief was dismiss the death penalty. It wasn't, judge, strike this witness. Don't let him use this evidence. It was, judge, dismiss the death penalty. That was what it was. This case, again, for whatever reason, the prosecution did it. Maybe 3 of the 4 families were like, I just don't want to go through this circus for, 8 weeks to trial and the next 30 years of appeals. And so, 3 out of 4, pretty good batting average if you can get 4 of the, 3 of those families on board for that. And then you'll have some finality. There'll never be total finality, right? Their child was killed at college, for God's sakes. There'll never be finality with that. but at
Terrible.
least these proceedings will be done. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'm just interested in your opinion. And then, what do you think will happen with the investigation on the leak? Do you think that they'll just kind of go away, or do you think this judge will insist that there's a follow through on that?
the judge, we learned in one of the motions, the orders that the judge issued the other day, we read through them on Friday. There's still a special prosecutor appointed for that. I don't think it's going to go away, even if there is a plea. It shouldn't, because this is a contempt proceeding at this particular point to cleanse the dignity of the court. These people, somebody violated the court order, and that shouldn't be taken lightly. You don't violate court orders. You may not like them, you may disagree with them, but you can't violate them. You got to go through the process, right? That's how our legal system works. And so whether it was prosecution, defense witness, law enforcement, I don't know. Could a court clerk, for all I know. The reality of it is somebody needs to be held accountable to cleanse the dignity of the court, to send a message to other people that when they impose a gag order, a protective order, that needs to be complied with. I comply with protective orders all the time. And guess what? Why do I do that? I don't want to go to jail for contempt.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All
I
right.
just wondered if they would end up dropping it. All right. Well, pleasure speaking with you, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Well, thank you for calling. I appreciate it. Frank, looks like we got a
Okay.
couple
Bye.
of super chats stacked up there. Let's take a quick look at these. Pam Wonderland, what a sham. All this hoopla and switching courts and all this time. I wonder when his lawyers knew this was the plan on their ends. Pam, this was all part of it. This was all part of the defense. Okay. Sometimes the defense is, you may get a conviction, but I'm going to make you crawl over glass to get there. Okay. I like to think that's my motto. I'm a reasonable guy. We can get along. But if you want to play hardball, guess what? You may get a conviction, but I'm going to make you crawl over glass to get there. And then hopefully I'm going to create a bunch of appellate issues on the back end that you're going to have to deal with. I get it. I would have loved to have seen a trial as well, but that's the way it works. And this is, I hate to say it, Pam, part of the process. I say this all the time. I've said it on the show many, many times. What most people don't realize is from the beginning to the end, whether it's a trial or a guilty plea, the truth or a pretty darn close version of the truth is going to come out. It will. It's called the adversarial system. And, sometimes the truth is prosecution can't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Sometimes the evidence against the accused is overwhelming. But guess what? That defendant still has the absolute right to. I've done trials where it has been on video. The defendant has confessed, and he says, I want my day in court. I want to see if everybody's going to show up. Okay, let's go do it. And you sit there and, you do what you can legally and ethically, and that's the way it goes. So I understand, Pam, but that's unfortunately or fortunately how the process works. Maybe somewhere along the lines, the defense pointed out something to the prosecution and said, oh, we may have a real issue here. Maybe there's an appellate issue. Maybe we think we're pretty confident with all this mitigation. Gosh, we could get death. We could not get death. You just never know. But certainty is a better thing. I'm telling you, prosecutors love guilty pleas. Is there another super chat up there we didn't look at? All right, next one. Jared, thank you. Will quality of life behind bars be different between having life in prison and death row? Will the family have a say in the plea deal? Back one first. Under normally the Victims' Rights Act, in most states, the victims' families need to be consulted, but they don't hold any sort of veto power. We already know that the Gonzalez family has put out on their Facebook page that they are not happy with it at all. They feel that the prosecution has let them down. But apparently it seems like the other three families are okay with it. Quality of life. Yes. Will Bryan Kohberger still be in probably a higher level of security prison? Yes. But when you're on death row, usually you're only out 1 hour a day. He's never going to get out of prison. But yes, quality of life. Sometimes you have to figure that for quality of life issues. I had once had a guy beat 2 death penalty cases. One in Kentucky, one in the state of Colorado. I represented a federal case, and he wanted to go serve his federal time. He wanted to go serve his time, even though he had a life sentence in Colorado for killing a police officer. He wanted to go do some federal time. And I can't get you there until you're done with your state case, right? Ultimately, some things worked out, and he got to do that federal time. But the federal time, it was a quality of life issues, right? Just like we all consider quality of life issues, people in prison do too. It matters. It matters. And who knows? That's what he probably want to do. Who knows? Maybe old Bryan doesn't like sitting around all cooped up all day long, and maybe he figures maybe he'll be able to get out of his cell and be in a general population at some point. Who knows? Who knows? All right. Is there one more there, Frank? Let's see. Nope. Okay. I guess that was super chats. Any more callers? No more callers, huh? No, we got a call. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to call in and tell me what you think about the Kohberger case, 725-228-TALK, 725-228-8255. Give us a call. Who do we have? Valerie, go ahead.
Hey, Scott, calling from Pennsylvania. Nice to catch you live tonight.
Well, thanks for joining us. This is some breaking news, so we thought we'd jump into it. And then we'll probably do our live tomorrow night as well at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So join us, please.
I'll do that. I'm not sure if you've already covered this, and if so, I do apologize. I'm just wondering, will Mr. Kohberger have to allocute in order to accept a plea deal?
Yes. So, I mean, the statement in allocution is the defendant always gets the own words before he gets sentenced, where he can say, I'm sorry, or I don't have anything to say, and the judge won't hold it against him. But when establishing a factual basis for the plea, I said, I hope this Judge Hippler, will do this. Because if you may recall back in the plea, if you've been following this for a long time, I had a real problem with the plea in the Chris Watts case because the judge said, how do you plead? Guilty. And I'm not that the judge wasn't a good judge, but I think a more thorough judge would say, tell me in your own words what you did to establish a factual basis for this plea. Tell me how you killed each one of these 4 young individuals, right? So that therefore there is no doubt that he in fact was the killer. He did this on his own. He did this after deliberation, and that he did it unlawfully. That would be the best way to handle it. So the judge goes through the colloquy, understand the rights you have, the rights you give up. Here's the possible penalties. Then tell me before I accept your guilty plea, what you did in your own words. Let's start with, Xanocronodal, right? And then go on to Ms. Gonsalves and Mr. Eaton, right? And just go through each and every one of them. So it's absolutely crystal clear that he knowingly, after deliberation, took the life of another, to wit, the deceased, without legal permission or justification. Okay. Just to quell any doubt in anybody's minds that they got the right guy, right? Or they didn't get the right guy. That would be great. And now he can always say in a statement of allocution, if he chose to do so, basically say, I'm sorry. I understand what I did was wrong. Maybe we'll never know. Maybe he'll want to save it for his, Dateline interviews, in custody, so he can tease people along. And how long till we have the Bryan Kohberger fan club, they'll be putting money on his books and wants to marry him.
Well, other second part of that, if he does offer all of that information, all that heartbreaking information, is it possible that we may never know can that get suppressed, squashed?
Yeah, more than likely, a lot of the police reports and things of that nature should be able to be publicly available with, a little bit of a warning. We saw this in the Daybell and Vallow trials in Idaho, is that they will seal the trial exhibits or anything related to like the autopsy or crime scene photos, things of that nature. It really just depends. I mean, I'm a firm believer it should be made available and people can choose to look at it or not, but treat it with the dignity and respect that it deserves, because we are talking about the, untimely deaths of 4 young individuals who had their whole life ahead of them. And it should be, treated with some dignity and respect.
Well, I certainly look forward to hearing you report on that if that's ever released.
Yeah, it will be. And if it becomes available, I'll try to get it. I mean, gosh, we've had the Valo stuff years ago when it was released in Arizona. We had the Watts stuff. I remember we got the Watts, as soon as the plea was done, we got the coroner's report sent to us immediately after that. I mean, I think the autopsy reports should be turned over so we know everything. That's how things work, right? Because there's going to be some conspiracy person saying, oh, he was framed, he didn't do it, his lawyer was terrible, they beat him into submission because they weren't any good, or you name it. The pro Kohberger people will come up with it. And I'm not anti Kohberger. I'm a defense attorney, God's sakes. His attorneys, and I would tell them this, their job was to get death taken off the table. It was very unlikely that they were going to get an acquittal. Their goal, and you can see it from all of their motions practice, that their goal was to make the case be not a death penalty case. And if I were to see Ann Taylor, I'd say, nice job. You did what your job was. And at some point, remember, at some point, Kohberger told her, I will take life if you take death off the table. She couldn't go to the prosecutor and ask for that unless she had authority from her client to do so. And people don't plead guilty to four homicides if they didn't do it. Right? So
Exactly.
So, like I said, the truth from the beginning to the time, whether it's a guilty plea or a trial, the truth or a pretty darn close version of it comes out. So, and I'm not trying to say I told you so, because I'm not. People should question things come out, right? I'm a firm believer, question authority, question what people tell you. How do you have the proof, right? Is there some other way to take a look at it? But at the end of the day, this was not that complicated of a case. You got this guy, his DNA's at the scene speeding away from the scene. His cell phone's on. He's, in the vicinity, but he turns it off just coincidentally minutes before the homicide takes place. Doesn't take a rocket science to figure out he was up to no good that night. He was up to no good.
Agreed.
So thank you for the call.
Thank you for taking my call. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. You too. Have a wonderful day. All right. We have another call.
Hello.
Hi. This is. Hello.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear your name.
My name is Patty.
Patty.
From the Chicago area.
All right. What's on your mind?
Well, what I couldn't kind of figure out, I was really surprised when I saw this breaking news, on YouTube, or I was flipping around, just scrolling for a few minutes, and then I turned on the TV and they had it going too. So I'm a whole hour later than you guys. So I'm just like, I don't know. But what I'm confused about is it said he accepted a plea deal.
Well, he's accepted to enter into a plea. It's not over. It's not done until the judge accepts his plea of guilty.
That means that the prosecutors offered it, though. I mean, or did Ann ask them? I mean, Ann Taylor, sir.
Now, my guess is what happens, normally what takes place is sometimes prosecutors will come to you and say, here's the offer on the case. Do you want it or not? Right? They're just moving cases along. In a case like this, I don't see the prosecutor saying, hey, will your guy take, life without the possibility of parole? Because, we're really worried about our case. They weren't saying that.
Right. I didn't think that.
I guarantee you from day one, Ann Taylor's had authority from her client, or pretty close thereafter. At least after the motions hearing is my guess, when they got slammed.
Right. When they cell phone data too.
Yeah, when they learned all the evidence that was going to come in against them and they couldn't stop it. that's when things got serious. I think you can even go back. I said that during that time period. Those motions hearings are a watershed moment. You just see what evidence is coming in, what's not, and they're going to be some serious, what do you want to do now kind of moments. And like I said, the attorney can't go cut a deal unless they have authority from the client to go cut the deal.
Right.
Because she goes, hey, my client will take life without possibility of parole. DA's like, well, yeah, okay, let me go talk with the families, all that kind of good stuff, any VRA compliance. Then, the defendant says no, everybody looks silly. So normally in cases like this, it is the DAs that say, well, I'll listen to what you have. I guarantee you that they had a mitigation. They've been getting all these reports. They probably had a meeting where they presented their mitigation for life. And for whatever reason, who knows? Maybe some of the family didn't want to go forward with it. There's, like I said, we know one family, the Gonzalez family, wanted to go forward for death. The other three have been pretty relatively quiet throughout this process. And obviously there's been a gag order to them as well. But I know early on, I think one of the families, maybe it was Xana Kernodle's family, was not big on the death penalty. So you just never know. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not the family's decision. It's the prosecutor's decision. And who knows? Who knows? Maybe something hit a nerve. Maybe they thought, with this evidence in today's world, you can probably convince one person.
Or, the leak from the state line stuff and things like that. Could have been a factor too.
Yep. Could have been anything. But it's not over. It's not over. It's not official until the judge accepts his plea.
Accepts it? Oh, wow. Okay. So we got to wait and see.
Well, we got to wait Wednesday. We got to wait till Wednesday.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Let's see who else we have here. So, all right. A little quick reset here for maybe people just joining us. The word is that the defendant in the Bryan Kohberger case, Mr. Bryan Kohberger himself, will be entering a guilty plea on Wednesday. I don't know the time of that, but on Wednesday, he'll be entering a guilty plea in exchange for his plea of guilty, more than likely to all counts of murder and the burglary count, that he will receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole, and the death penalty will be taken off the table. Some people, that's great news. Other people, that sucks. We wanted to hear the evidence. We wanted to see him put to death. The family, the Gonzalez family, is very upset. They've already posted on their Facebook page that this is not what they wanted. They're disappointed, and they believe that the prosecutors have let them down. At the end of the day, it's always the prosecutor's responsibility to do what they think is best. They should obviously consult the victim's family, but the victim's family does not have some sort of super veto power on what they want to do. At the end of the day, prosecutor gets to make that call. At the end of the day, it's not what the defense attorneys think or what they recommend. It's ultimately Bryan Kohberger's decision, and he gets to decide if he wants to plead guilty and admit in open court under the pains and penalty of perjury that he is in fact guilty of quadruple homicide, murder, and he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And as we talked about, any sort of guilty plea, this one should take a little longer than most. It depends on what courtroom you're in, right? You go to some courts, they're like, you read these plea paperwork, you understand the offer, the rights you have, the rights you give up, boom. All right, I'll go and accept a guilty plea. Let's move on. Usually not so serious cases. Federal court, a guilty plea could take 45 minutes because they go through and explain everything, make sure you understand the rights you have, the rights you give up. The judges make it sound like, my God, this sounds like a great deal. I want to go to trial. Well, let's do this, judge. And then they explain the possible penalties and consequences. They have to make sure that it is a knowing, voluntary guilty plea on the part of the defendant. No pressure, no coercion. Now, obviously, the question is, well, there's coercion. Judges are trying to kill me over here. I took the deal, right? Because I don't want to die, right? But the most important thing is, in my opinion, the judge needs to say, Judge Hippler needs to say, Mr. Kohberger, we're going to have this conversation. I don't care what anybody says, what you say. You can talk to your lawyer, but I need to have a conversation with you. And at some point, he needs to say, Mr. Kohberger, tell me in your own words what you did to cause the death of each of these 4 young people. And did you do it after deliberation? Tell me how you did it so that the world knows what he did. And it will be forever put to bed that they got the right guy. Okay. And frankly, if he's not willing to do that, then he shouldn't take a guilty plea. There'll be a trial. And the judge should do that. Like, no judge should want somebody to plead guilty to something they didn't do. But we know it happens all the time. But some judges will say, tell me in your own words what you did. And if you won't admit to the elements, Judge, I did this and this was unlawful and I took the life, some judges aren't going to do it. Federal judges aren't going to do it. So I hope he does that so that it's clear to the world, to Bryan Kohberger's family and everybody there in the world, that if he's pleading guilty, he's doing it knowingly and voluntarily, and he's pleading guilty to what he did. Now, some people could say, what a little putz. Bryan Kohberger, Mr. Tough Guy, attacking people in the middle of the night with your K-bar, right? You know, I've had this one since the summer of 1988 after boot camp. Long time ago. I guess I could say, look, Bryan, didn't lose my knife after 30 some odd years, 36 years or whatever that is. I still got mine and still got the original sheath too. It's a little more broken in, I'm sure, than yours was, but I didn't lose it. But Mr. Bryan Kohberger, Mr. Tough Guy, going into people's houses at night while they're sleeping and attacking them in their sleep with a K-bar and doing terrible things. Not so tough now, are you? Apparently you don't want to die. You'd rather have a little bit of better quality of life than being on death row. A little bit of better quality of life than, being locked up 23 hours a day, only getting out for 1 hour of exercise. So, yeah. We'll see. Guess we'll see Wednesday. Still don't know the time on Wednesday, but we'll definitely know by tomorrow as well. And then we'll bring it to you on Wednesday as well. I have to clear my schedule. I think Wednesday is pretty much open. I hope so, because I want to watch this. All right. We have another call. Who do we have? Amy, go ahead.
Hi.
How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you? Thank you. I'm so glad you took my call.
Of course.
I'm just curious what happens if Bryan Kohberger says that he's not happy with his representation during his allocution.
I don't foresee that taking place because there's nothing that rises to the level of a ineffective assistance of counsel. No way.
Mm-hmm.
She's been more than effective.
I know she's been good, but I'm just wondering if he says that.
It's not going to change it. Then he should ask for a new attorney and proceed to trial, but don't go saying you're going to accept a guilty plea if you're going to say that. I assure you, his attorneys have walked him through every question that the judge, what they anticipate the judge will ask him, just like I kind of went through it.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't foresee that as a possibility. And if that was his desire, then he writes a letter to the judge or they file a motion to withdraw, irreconcilable differences can no longer proceed, something along those lines, but not, I'm going to take a plea. I mean, can you imagine the taint that this would have on any jury panel, right? That, he's going to take a guilty plea and then he backs out. Well, why would you say you're going to plead guilty? Oh, I guess apparently what people say matters, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, I was wondering about the Alford plea too, because there was another case in Arkansas where the guy took an Alford plea. Well, he's out now, I think.
Well,
he took an Alford.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, an Alford plea is basically saying, I'm not saying I did, I'm not saying I didn't. It's treated as a guilty plea, but you're saying I'm willing to accept the consequences of it. The judge shouldn't accept an Alford plea in this particular situation. An Alford plea is saying, hey, I recognize that, there's a pretty strong evidence and there's a really strong likelihood that I'm going to be convicted. And I don't want to take the chance to do that. This should be a straight up, tell me in your own words what you did. We're not messing around. An Alford plea is like when you go to traffic court, right? You get that speeding ticket and you plead guilty to a defective headlamp. Well, your headlamp worked fine.
2008.
Your headlamp worked fine, right? But you're taking a plea to avoid a greater consequence. And, I'm not saying my headlight did work or didn't work, but I'm willing to accept the consequences of it. You take your 2-point violation and pay a fine, right? That's an Alford plea. You don't do Alford pleas on homicide cases. You don't. Not on this. Not on a death penalty case. Like I said, I hope Judge Hippler, if you're listening, people working for Judge Hippler's courtroom, make sure you have Kohberger state in his own words why he's guilty to each and every victim.
What if he doesn't? What if he doesn't?
Then the judge shouldn't accept his guilty plea and says, see you August 4th for trial.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think Hippler would do that. I really think Judge Hippler would do that.
I have a feeling there's something else coming. It doesn't, I don't know. I know this is what Ann Taylor wanted. I know this is what she was working for, but
she's been working from day one.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Most death penalty cases don't go to trial.
Appreciate you.
They plead guilty. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Any other, Frank? Any other? Oh, got another call. Go ahead. You're on. No name.
Hi, Scott. This is Helen.
Hi, Helen.
I wanted you to know I've been a long-time viewer, and I love the way you explain things. And I don't really have a question, but I have an opinion.
Okay.
I'm a resident of Idaho.
Oh, really?
And we've been through, yes, I live in Twin Falls, Idaho. And we've been through the Lori Vallow Daybell trials and all of that. And I just don't see where the death penalty is necessary in this case. I mean, I think he deserves it, but I would much rather see him go to prison for the rest of his life. And he's not going to get his vegetarian diet. If he is let out into the general population, he's probably not going to last very long. And I think he's going to be miserable beyond belief because he's such a narcissist. And I think it's a good thing. I'm sorry for the Gonzalez, I can't say their name, Gonzalez family, that they feel this way. And I'm not against the death penalty, but I would rather have a sure thing than take a chance on one rogue juror.
I can't disagree with you. It provides certainty. Prosecution gets the confirmation that they got the right guy. It's a plea bargain, right? Plea bargain. They plead guilty. They get something in exchange for it. We take the death penalty off the table. That's what a plea bargain is.
Right. Well, and I think I don't think it's a matter of saving taxpayers' money, but it certainly will save us a lot of money for something that could have been the same outcome. And that's life without parole.
Yeah. And,
if we had one juror that wouldn't give the death penalty.
Yeah. You never know. You just need one juror. And they say, well, that whole autism thing, I have somebody that's autistic in my family. Gee, I don't know. Maybe you never know what is going to persuade a jury to go life. And think about it here. We had the Aurora Theater shooting cases where I think it was, gosh, don't hold me to this number, but I think it was like 14 dead. And if you can't get a death penalty after 14 dead people that went to a movie at midnight, right? But it was 11-1 for death, and one hung out, so therefore he gets life. And I think that trial in Colorado?
It
was, but I think he ultimately got moved to Pennsylvania to serve his time out It was the Aurora
Okay,
Theater
well,
shooting case.
Idaho definitely believes in the death penalty. So I think that there's a good chance he would have gotten the death penalty. However, this is a sure thing, and I like Judge Hippler, and I hope he makes him allocute to every single charge and tell what he did.
Yep.
If he doesn't do that, I'm going to be unhappy.
He should have to explain what he did. Make sure that there is a factual basis for the plea.
Yeah. What do you think his chances are of making it into prison very long?
You know, I don't know. Unless he comes across as just a know-it-all smartass, he'll probably be able to get along. I mean, after all, he'll still be going down there with a jacket of 4 murders on him, right? Hate to say it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And just so we're clear, you got the plea where the court engages in a colloquy, and then you got a statement of allocution. The allocution statement is the formal opportunity. The defendant always gets the last word to address the court before sentencing in a criminal case, right? That's so the defendant can express remorse, explain their actions,
right,
and obviously potentially influence. I think a lot of people are getting that kind of confused versus the actual change of plea hearing, where I'm saying the judge should make him state what he did on the open record, how he did it. Okay. Allocution, you don't have to make a statement of allocution. Sometimes less is more to the sentencing. I just did one last week, and my client's like, you know, it's one of those risky things. I'm like, let's go to trial, man. We're going to be in trial next week. Let's go do this thing. No promises or guarantees, but let's go do it. And he's like, no, I'll take the misdemeanor. Like, okay, take the misdemeanor. But he's like, I'm not saying anything because I don't feel sorry. Right. That's fine. Don't say a word.
Yeah. And Scott, I don't think that the Gonzalez family is thinking ahead, but you're right about all the appeals and that woman that talked earlier about it opening the wounds and never allowing them to heal. And I think this will allow them to go on with their lives and not have that wound opened over and over again for the next 30 years.
Yeah. And I mean, and the reality of it is, and I get it, you know, the death penalty, it's on the books, federal, and then various states have it. The Colorado legislature took ours away here a couple of years ago. But life without possibility of parole, it's not a good thing. I mean, not a good thing in the sense of it doesn't resolve and get certainty, you know, resolve these guilty pleas. But that's a long time. And if anyone's ever been to a prison or been to prison and known somebody that's been in prison, what is the one thing they don't want to be at? It's prison. It is not a good life. Your life could be taken at a moment's notice, at a whim of somebody that doesn't like you, that isn't like the way you look. They thought disrespected you for any reasons. I mean, I've represented people that stab people in prison because they disrespected them. One was they sprayed the microwave where my guy's cup of noodle was in the soup, or was in cup of noodle. And the guy got all freaked out by it. It was closed, but he didn't like it. They exchanged words. They go back to the cell, go and get a shank, stab the guy, 4 times for no reason. No reason other than.
Well, I think with Brian's personality, that's what I meant earlier when I said, how long do you think that you will last in prison? Because I don't think he has the personality that will be conducive to other prisoners really liking him.
Correct. Yeah, and that's why I said I think if he doesn't come across as a know-it-all, probably gonna come across as being superior to everybody else. Yeah, he may make it a while.
How possible do you think that is with his personality, though? I mean, from everything we've seen, he does think he knows it all. He thinks he's smarter than everybody else in the room.
I think it'll be nearly impossible.
Right. I do too.
He will piss somebody off.
So,
excuse my French.
Yes, he will. That's my point. So he may be getting the death penalty anyway.
Yep. I mean,
and you know, he's only been in jail. He doesn't know what prison is like. It's not like jail.
Yeah, he's been in
It's
county
a lot
jail.
Worse.
He's been in county jail for the last 2.5 years. He's been treated like a king, so to speak, because, you know, they don't want anything bad to happen to him. But when you go to DOC, man, you're just another number down there. And someone could take him out. He could get a roommate. They don't like him. Next thing you know, gosh, terrible things could happen in his sleep to him. Could you imagine? Somebody looking for a headline, somebody's serving life without parole. What do they care? Oh, they're going to give me the death penalty for, you know, something doing harm to Bryan Kohberger. You know, it's, it can, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously, I'm not wishing that upon anybody, but it could happen.
Well, I just want to see justice done, and I don't want him out on the street to harm any other people. And by catching him, they probably saved lots of lives, because if he'd have gotten away with this, he'd have done it again and again. Yeah,
no doubt. Well, just remember, it's not over until the court actually accepts his guilty plea. But I guarantee, well, I can't guarantee anything, but I would say that his attorneys have gone through that paperwork. They know exactly, they're trying to anticipate what the judge is going to ask, what he needs to say to get his plea deal.
Well, so far, all your predictions have been pretty right on, so I trust your judgment.
Well, thanks. We don't get it always right.
No, but you get it right a lot more than you get it wrong.
I think we checked. I think our predictions are right 98.4% of the time.
Well, I really enjoy watching your program, and the main reason is because you talk to us in a language that we can understand. And you're always so clear about everything you say. And I, for one, really appreciate it. I wish you had 1 million viewers.
Well, thank you very much. And hopefully we will soon. You know, we're almost to 300,000, but maybe we'll get to 1 million soon. But yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate you watching. And I mean, that's always been the goal. I mean, this is not my day job. My day job is I'm a practicing criminal defense attorney. And the reason we started this channel was because I got so frustrated watching the evening news when people from the news channel would explain something and they didn't know the difference between an arraignment and a preliminary hearing or a sentencing, and they just came across as stupid. I want to try to explain it in greater detail with the facts and the law, not some crazy theories kind of thing, but let's focus on how it really works. What's going on? What is the prosecution thinking? What is the defense thinking? What are the tactics that the defense is going to use? How is the prosecution going to counter any of those attacks? What's the law? What's the legal standard? That's what we try to focus upon. You can go listen to anybody you want that can come up with the craziest ideas. I like to focus on reality. I am the mayor of Reelsville, ladies and gentlemen. I deal in reality. I can't go off on some crazy tangent to go to court where my client's going to get convicted of something and spend the rest of their life in prison because I think something bizarre or crazy. I need to be the reality keeper in situation. And that means calling balls and strikes, telling it how it is, telling the clients the good, the bad, and the ugly. Here's the strengths of your case. Here's the weaknesses. And guess what? We can't ignore the weaknesses because they're going to come in. So anyway, thank you very much for the call.
Right. Well, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. Let's just do a quick reset for people that have joined us here. We went live. The breaking news of the day is that on Wednesday, Bryan Kohberger It's anticipated that he's going to enter a plea of guilty, and in exchange for his plea of guilty to the deaths of all 4 of the Idaho students, that he will enter, when he enters his plea of not guilty, he will get a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Some people are not happy about it. Apparently, Kaylee Gonzalez's family is not happy about it. But we haven't heard anything from Xana Carnodal, Madison Mogan, or Ethan Chapin's family. But ultimately, it's the prosecutor's decision at the end of the day on how to proceed. I'm sorry, Frank, you said we had a super chat. This kind of reminds me of the Cosmo DiNardo trial in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. His guilty plea removed the death penalty. My mom was the teacher of a victim. Yep. That's the way it's done. I hate, I have said this, even as a defense attorney, okay? In Colorado, they got rid of the death penalty. And frankly, it wasn't used that often. I don't think they've executed anybody before it was repealed for 35 years, okay? It was a very, very long time. And, but it was a tool. It was a bargaining chip. And even if you are opposed to the death penalty, you have to admit it is a bargaining chip, because I guarantee you, if there was not a death penalty in the Bryan Kohberger case, it'd be going to trial. What, the offers go to prison for consecutive life sentences? See you in trial. We'll see if we can't come up with something, right? But here, it's a plea bargain, and that's what people don't understand about it, whether you oppose it or not. Eventually, there's going to be a time for the worst of the worst. And remember, the death penalty is not unconstitutional, although it was at one time in the early 70s. Supreme Court rejected that again and said, you can do it, you just can't engage in cruel and unusual punishment. Supreme Court has said you're not entitled to a painless execution. You're just entitled to one that, is not cruel and unusual. But it is a bargaining chip, ladies and gentlemen. And the bargaining chip here was, we're going to put you to death, Mr. Kohberger. And apparently, in his 30-something-ness of life, 30-something years of life, 30 years of life, I guess, to be exactly. I think he just turned 29 to 30. He says, you know what? I think I still got a little bit more to give, even if it's in prison for the rest of my life. And so he had to give permission to his attorneys to say, I give you permission to get a plea bargain for me. I will plead guilty to everything if you get me a plea of life without the possibility of parole. That's kind of the way it works. And I'm telling you, if they didn't have it, so for all the states out there, like, oh, we're so enlightened. We're not going to have the death penalty. It's morally wrong. It's super expensive. It can be. I guess so. And it depends on the people of the jury. But most states, the reason they still have it in California is because the legislature tried to repeal it and the people put it on the ballot, and now it's part of the Constitution. I guarantee you, here in the state of Colorado, it would have passed in the state of Colorado, but the legislature didn't give the people the vote. They just revoked it. It's a bargaining chip. And I guarantee you, if Idaho didn't have the death penalty, we wouldn't be having a guilty plea. We'd be going to trial because he had nothing to lose. Life without parole? Pfft. Okay, you get that for 1 murder. Oh, life without parole for 2? Pfft. Okay, whatever. 3, 4, suddenly it gets real. It gets real. I tell you, it gets real all of a sudden when they're saying we're going to kill your client. Imagine what it feels like to him. And the reality is, I don't think the prosecution blinked. I think the defendant blinked. He wants to live. He doesn't want to die, frankly, in a much more humane manner than the victims allegedly died in this particular case. A gruesome death by a sharp object. It's not some prop that I bought. For those who don't, I got this the summer of 1988, right after getting done with Marine Corps boot camp. K-bar. It's a knife of Marines. Put it on your web belt there. Taped it on. Put it on your war belt. Always had it when you take it to the field. Like I said, since 88. How many years is that, Frank?
88.
36? I don't know. That's a long time, though, right?
Yeah.
And I can say something that Bryan Kohberger can never say. I didn't lose mine. I didn't lose the sheath. So, yeah, 37 years, right? My God, I'm getting old. 37 years I graduated from boot camp. Jeez. Went to boot camp the summer of, it was 16 June of 1988. I remember that date. It's forever ingrained in my life because I remember I woke up in the morning on 17th June of 1988 thinking, what the hell have I done? But anyway, we digress. All right, so Bryan Kohberger is going to take a guilty plea on Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. A guilty plea. Now, I get it. He can say not guilty. And I hate to say I was right again, but, we are correct 98.6% of the time. I think that's been performed by an independent consulting firm. But, if Bryan Kohberger had any chance of winning this case, it would have been when his attorney said not guilty, and then they tried to press speedy trial, but then they waived the speedy trial because they needed more time. He should have been absolutely truthful with them and said, yeah, I did it. And guess what? There's no way they're going to be able to get all this stuff in within that 6-month period. There's no way there's going to be prepared. And go do that trial court thing you do and try to keep the damn evidence out. Right? The government's had 2.5 years and there's still, right, issues on discovery. Not so much as like in the Vallow and Daybell trials, but they were still working on it. 2.5 years to get ready. You think the government would have been ready to present a thorough case in 6 months from the date that he said not guilty? Absolutely not. That was his only shot. And as soon as he waived speedy trial, yep, you knew. Just something defense attorneys know, right? I've had 9 not guilty on homicides where not to a lesser included offense, but walk out the door. Common theme of all those, we go first trial setting. The other thing is clients kept their freaking mouth shut. Absolutely. All right, super chat. Nope, we already did that one, I think. Yeah, Josh. And just so to make it clear, we appreciate super chats. It certainly helps highlight the question, but we don't ask or beg for them. I assure you of that. This is Georgia Kimmy, I think, maybe G.A. Kimmy. Do we know if the defense approached the prosecution or vice versa? I do not have any personal knowledge of this, but my guess is that the defense went to the prosecution and said, we will plead guilty. Take death off the table. That's usually the way these negotiations start. And I think it became quite clear. Bryan Kohberger got the judge's orders last Friday. If you'd like to hear those orders that probably broke Bryan Kohberger's will to live, or at least to litigate, we have the redacted motion for the defendant's motion to continue, denied, right? Then we had the motion regarding the alternate perpetrator. We read it last Friday's show, denied. And he basically, Judge Hippler basically said, are you kidding me? No, this is the worst Hail Mary I've ever seen. No, he didn't say that, but he basically said there's no way that anything will come in as it relates to the alleged alternate suspects in this particular case. There's nothing tying these people to them other than maybe had some interaction with one or more of the victims. But like the one was a guy that literally, apparently, based upon the order, saw her at a restaurant. I think it was Zaina Kernodal, and oh, should I go approach her? And then he chickened out. And the defense was like, we must have had something to do with it. The judge was like, no. So that was his last, those two motions that they filed, and we've gone through them all. These orders were the nail in the coffin. Now, like I said, I don't know for sure who did it, but my guess is the defense Because remember, the defense can't go and either A, accept a plea offer on behalf of the defendant unless they have authority to do so. And the defense can't go and say, hey, let's make a deal, and unless there is authority to do so. Now, sometimes, prosecutor will be like, hey, man, if your guy pleads guilty to this, I'll dismiss that charge. Like, ooh, okay, go talk to the client. Just an offer, not accepted, right? It's classic contract negotiations, offer, acceptance, consideration. You offer, then you counter offer, that original offer goes away. So there's probably some haggling back and forth, but since day one, the defense position has always been life without the possibility of parole. We'll take life. It's not like they took a full page ad like they did at the case here for the shooting cases, where they literally took an ad saying, we'll plead guilty. They released, I think, the offer to the press or something. I think they even put it on there. And they went to trial. It lasted weeks, if not months. And I think that one was it was like 12 or 14 people that the guy killed. That was the Aurora Theater shooting case. And all it takes is one. So, like I said, it is, nobody likes trial other than maybe the attorney's going to do it. It's stressful for the victim's family, the witnesses, it's inconvenient, the staff. And it's not great for it's fun for the trial attorneys once they get in there, but it's a lot of work moving up to it. And but they're uncertain. I have won trials I should have lost, and I've lost trials that I thought I was in the game on. Can never guarantee what a jury will do. If anybody tells you or guarantees you what a jury will do, they're lying. You go to trial on a good day, it's 50-50 shot for the defense. That's a good day. That's the best day ever. Normally it's probably like 90-10, right? The prosecution's supposed to win. They have the witnesses. They have all the evidence. You usually have the client that maybe doesn't present well. So many uncertainties to it. You never know who the juries are going to be. You don't get a whole lot of time to talk with them. You get a little more in a death penalty case, but you never know what they're going to do. Are they holding back from you? Do they have a grudge? Well, you'll never know unless somehow they find out. Somebody tells you. If they sit there and say, oh, no, I can be fair and impartial. Nope, never heard of this case before in my life. Haven't heard a thing. Nope. Love the prosecution, love the defense. Give them an equal shake either way or not. So that's the way it goes. All right. Frank, how you doing? Do you have to run? No, you're good. Okay. I don't want to keep you from getting home. All right. Let's see. Was there another super chat that came up there? Or am I just making that up? And remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to call in, feel free to do so. 725-825-8255. Only rule is if you disagree with me, you get head of the line. And 2, just don't talk through your computer. You got to listen on the phone. Otherwise, there's a really bad delay. Quickly, Don Spencer, super chat here. I want to thank you for the trial. I was able to attend live because your camera there. Then this is when I became a member. Well, thank you very much, Don. We appreciate you. Try to bring you the good trials. That's for sure. Somebody asks here real quick, Long Island Hillbilly, is Kohberger's allocution required? No. Just so we're clear. You have a guilty plea, and then you got the statement in allocution. Statement of allocution is the last word the defendant gets before the judge imposes sentence. Obviously, it's used to sway a judge for a more lenient sentence. In this particular case, it won't. It's if the judge accepts the guilty plea, it is all but a certainty as to what he will get. So, but a statement in allocution, first of all, it's required to offer it to the defendant, but the defendant does not have to exercise it, right? So just to be clear, key aspects of statement of allocution: after the guilty plea or conviction, but before the judge imposes sentence. I was at a hearing the other day and I spoke, the prosecutor spoke, and then the judge started going into it. I'm like, no, Judge, he gets the last word. She was like, oh my gosh, I forgot. I'm so sorry. Whereupon he whacked my client for 24 years. But that's what happens when you do inappropriate things with 12-year-olds. Just saying. Little professional practice pointer there. All right. So the purpose, don't speak directly. The defendant gets to speak directly to the judge, potentially mitigating the sentence. It occurs afterwards. It can include expressions of remorse. It can include explanation of the circumstances surrounding the crime, right? It can be done orally or in writing if they choose to do so, but the defendant has the right to allocute, but is not required to exercise it. They can choose to waive his right to do so. Allocution obviously is an attempt to humanize the defendant and provide context that may lead to a more lenient sentence, probably not in this particular case. And here's the thing. The judge has read all of these expert reports. He's litigated all his motions. He knows plenty about Bryan Kohberger. So I expect a plea and hopefully immediate sentencing on Wednesday as well. And the practice of allocution has roots in English common law and has been adopted in most U.S. jurisdictions. And under the federal rules, it provides the opportunity for the defendant to speak before sentencing. So they've actually codified it there. But that's just the way it's done. It's been done that way in every sentencing hearing, plea that's taken place. The defendant always gets the last word. Like I said, usually defense counsel goes or prosecution goes first, but the defendant always gets the last word. Well, and then the judge technically gets the last word. But that's their time to say, I'm sorry. You know, I had a client the other day. Yeah, I remember that letter that the young victim read saying that I was a piece of garbage. He's like, I am, and I deserve everything I get. I'm like, ooh, where did that come from? How about I'm sorry? But anyway, may have shaved off a couple of years. Who knows? All right. You said we had another call, Frank. Sorry.
Yes.
Sue.
Okay. Hi. Can the prosecutors stipulate the terms of the guilty plea by the defendant, let's say, to explain why he committed the murder, how he chose his victims, and what did he do with the knife?
Yes. Okay. So we talked about this.
Would?
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope they do. And I've never practiced in Ada County. We went out there for the Lori Vallow trial, jumped in Crime Talk 1 and flew out there. Come to think of it, we were out there twice. Frank and I went once, and then I went out as well. But those obviously were trials. But it can be done simply in either way. You can have a plea agreement that says these are the terms. He's going to plead guilty. We'll dismiss counts, whatever. For example, in the federal system, or I've seen very serious cases, they will kind of lay out the factual basis. And like I said, in a federal case, somebody pleads guilty to the plea agreement. I mean, they can be 30, 40 pages long, depending on how much is involved to say, this is what happened. This is the evidence that the government would show. Boom, 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 boom. And the defendant has a right to object to it. I hope, whether through a plea agreement or through the judge's colloquy, where he engages in a direct conversation with Mr. Kohberger, explaining the rights he has, the rights he's given up, the elements of the offense, and the possible penalties, that the judge has him say in his own words what he did and how he did it. Just so it's clear.
I understood that.
Okay.
I understood when you had spoke about that earlier, but I wasn't clear if the prosecutors could stipulate that he must explain, these three items before we'll engage in a plea agreement with you.
They could. I don't know if it'll happen. I don't want to act like I have a crystal ball, but I guarantee you. Well, I hate this. I can't. I'm not going to guarantee anything. All right. I don't like making guarantees that I can't keep. Right. I don't like making promises I can't keep. But I believe either at the plea hearing or shortly thereafter, we will get an explanation as to why. I am sure.
And I hope
I am taking my educated guess that at some point, the prosecutors demanded to know why. Why did he do it? Why did he pick those victims? Who was the target? Who was just collateral consequences to him? And I don't mean to be disrespectful with that, but people that weren't
And
supposed to be
where is
there.
the knife?
Yep.
Okay.
And those are
Okay,
all the
thanks. I think
things.
that would.
Yes.
I think it would be really beneficial to the families to be able to hear that.
Yep. And I can't guarantee you that we'll get it at the plea hearing, but I bet shortly thereafter we will. I think that would be a
Okay,
requirement by the prosecution to say, I want to know, like I said, where's the knife? Why? Who did you pick out? The prosecution holds the cards. They can dictate what they got out of this for a plea bargain.
All right. Well, I was kind of hoping this would go to trial, but I guess this is the next best thing.
I agree. I wish it was going to go to trial as well. And not because I want to treat it as a sporting event, but obviously it's a very serious crime. There are a lot of unanswered questions and people need to know what evidence there is, right? If there's a weakness in the case or is so overwhelming, but when somebody pleads guilty, when you plead guilty, you admit as a matter of law and as a matter of fact that that's what you did. You can't say, well, I took a plea bargain. Yep. I only killed one. The other two, tripped on whatever and, cut themselves. No, you're pleading guilty to 4 quadruple homicides. You will forever be known as a quadruple murderer.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be in front of the TV on Wednesday then.
Well, come watch it here. Okay.
I will.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Susan wants to know, will the plea be televised? I believe it will be. It should be. All of the other hearings have been open, unless, of course, they had some great reason for secrecy, which I still get frustrated about with the state of Idaho. But hey, I get it. Yes, it should be televised. I don't see why not. I think the world needs to see and hear what he did, particularly the people that came up with all of these crazy, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but some of the, yes, Bryan Kohberger is presumed innocent. I understand that. I'm a defense attorney. I preach that to a jury every time I go to trial. But we're not in trial, okay? And in the court of public opinion, based upon the information we know, it didn't look good. The pesky thing, that pesky DNA, right there, ladies and gentlemen, right there in the little button, right in there on the K-bar. Like I said, 37 years ago, I picked up my K-bar. Bryan Kohberger couldn't keep track of his for 6 freaking months. Loses his sheath. My God, Bryan. You could lose your gear in the military. You could die. You know what they say? Failure to pay attention to detail demonstrates an inability to accept larger responsibility. Absolutely. All right, we got another call. Let's take it here. Who do we have?
Yeah, hi. My name is Arnie.
Arnie, how you doing?
My question is, I'm great, and your show is great.
Thank you.
My question is, what would lead Judge Hitler to reject the plea deal on Wednesday? And if he should refuse the plea deal at that time, how can the trial possibly go forward when the world now knows that he's pled guilty?
Well, he wouldn't have pled guilty if the trial goes forward. So a couple of things. The only thing that I think that would make the judge reject the plea deal would be if Bryan Kohberger waffled on the guilty plea. And, said, well, you want to plead guilty? No, I really didn't do it. Judge is going to say, fine, see you in trial next month, right? When they start jury selection in July. The judge could not force the prosecution to go forward with the death penalty. That's their decision. But if the plea didn't go through, the death penalty would be on the table, right? Because he's got to plead guilty to make it go off the table. But the death penalty is at the discretion of the prosecution. So they're the ones that seek it. They have to elect to do it. But the trial would go forward. I've been there where I remember I thought I had a plea worked out and the guy's like, no, I want my trial. I changed my mind. I kind of looked at my client, looked at the DA, looked at the judge, and I'm like, guess we're going to trial, Your Honor. See you next week. And yeah, now obviously it's not a high profile case like this particular case, but it's plea negotiations that would never come in at trial that he was pleading guilty. That would be subject to 408 and 410 under the rules of evidence. And it's not over until Judge Hippler accepts it. Bottom line, judge has to say, I find that the plea is knowing, voluntary, that I find that there's a sufficient factual basis for the plea. I acknowledge that Bryan Kohberger understands his rights. He's voluntarily giving them up, and that he is doing this voluntarily without undue influence or coercion. So until the judge goes through that, makes those findings of facts and conclusions of law, nothing's official. Bryan Kohberger could change his mind tomorrow. He could change his mind Wednesday at the plea hearing and say, nope, changed my mind. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for calling.
Okay. Bye now.
Thank you. All right. Another call. And for those who haven't joined us before, the person I'm talking to is Frank. He's our producer behind the scene, the hardest working man in show business back there. Usually we do our lives on Tuesday nights, but tonight we're doing it tonight. Well, because it was so breaking news. Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty. Date is set for Wednesday. Don't know exactly what time on Wednesday, but either mid-morning is my guess or sometime early afternoon. All the logistics to get everything in, but these kinds of things happen. Everybody wants to know if there's going to be a plea, let's get it done now. And if he does back out or doesn't go through, guess what? We still got a trial date set. So yeah, that's why they were moving fast. All right, let's go. Next call. Sorry.
Federal, then various states had it.
Oh, sorry. You're going to have to.
Took ours away here
Hello?
a couple years ago.
Yes.
But life without the possibility for
Hi. Who do we have? Can you turn your computer down in the background?
Oh, gosh. I'm so sorry. That's my TV.
That's okay. We're getting a little feedback. That's all.
On the street, Mark. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's all good.
I'm going. Sorry, I'm
all right.
like a goofball.
Don't worry about it. You're doing great. You're doing great.
Okay.
Takes a lot of guts to pick up the phone and call. Perfect. There you go. It's quiet now. All right.
Okay.
So where are you calling from?
I am calling from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
All right. What's on your mind?
I'm calling because I was wondering in the hearing on Wednesday with Bryan Kohberger, the victims that are alive and the victims' families, will they have a time to share victim impact statements or not really because he's pleading guilty?
It depends. Since the only outcome will be life without the possibility of parole, they could go immediately to pleading guilty to sentencing. And normally the victims' families are entitled to make sentencing statements, usually under most victims' rights acts in every state. And the Victims' Rights Act has been addressed many times throughout this case in the Kohberger matter. And so the point is, yes, they should be able to make a statement if they choose to do so. Sometimes the prosecutors will say, Judge, obviously his family, is destroyed by this. You send your kid off to college, you expect him to come home safely, that kind of stuff, right? He may say, one of the family members doesn't support this, but 3 families did, and the buck stops with me. And, the prosecutor's going to say, I'm thinking this goes forward. It provides finality, the resources for the next 30 years for appeals, and goes from there. But yes, the family should be able to address the court. It won't make any difference.
I was also just wondering too about
some of their friends too, since they went in and saw their dead friends.
Yeah.
And it probably makes no difference anyway to someone like Mr. Kohberger if he is probably a sociopath.
Yeah, they're not going to let everybody get up and talk. Usually it's going to be immediate family member. It's not like a wake or something where everybody gets a chance to get up and say something.
And is it? This sounds horrible, but is it televised? Can you see him in the hearing?
Yes, we'll let you know. We'll put it out up on our Facebook, the Kohberger stuff. We'll put it out there. We'll know more tomorrow. Right now, it's just set for Wednesday. I don't know the time yet, but tune in tomorrow's show and we'll give that to you. And we have posted all of the videos from the Bryan Kohberger pretrial hearings and motions hearings and things of that nature. So yes, we're definitely going to bring you the potential guilty plea on Wednesday of Bryan Kohberger.
I've seen them, and I just wanted to tell you that thank you for your clarity and your erudition as far as your of knowing about the law.
Well, thank you.
Really ignorant people.
Well, no, I mean,
both sides, prosecution and defense, and
after explaining it to clients for 30 years, I should be able to do it to everybody else and explain it like I know what I'm talking about, right? And I try to do that and so that's always been the goal, is that let's break it down into bite-sized pieces so everybody understands it. I'm not.
Well, and it's not like, oh, this is titillating evidence. It's just like, this is what's going on. And yeah, so I very much appreciate that. And you're doing great work. So thank you.
Well,
and
thank
I'll
you.
Keep tuning in.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to call. That takes a lot of guts to do that. Most people won't do it. So thanks for taking the chance.
Yeah, I'm like terrified I'm going to hear myself on TV. Okay.
Well, you will be able to do it, and you sounded great.
All right, thank you.
All right.
You have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful night. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Another super chat here. Will he have to reveal where he hid the knife? Maybe. Probably not required by the judge, but the prosecutor may have requested that type of information as part of any plea deal. It's very possible. I don't know, but I hope that's the case. But my gut feeling is, whether we find out at the hearing on Wednesday, that we will suddenly learn a lot more information about what was the motive, why these young people were targeted, who was the primary target. Somehow I think that information will come out. So, yes. Do you think Ann Taylor is a good lawyer? Yes. Did I think she made some, I don't want to say frivolous, but she was doing her job. She was doing her job, doing what she's supposed to do. And frankly, she got the result that she was more than likely picked to do, and got the result that she wanted, which was no death. So yes, she is a good lawyer. The prosecutors were good lawyers, because guess what? They made Bryan Kohberger bend a knee, and he's going to come in and plead guilty. And guess what? When you plead guilty, that's the ultimate confession that you did what you were charged with, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, I think there was good attorneys on all sides. We like that. We like good attorneys. She didn't do anything unethical. She did what she had to do. She was doing her job. And there was no, they were professional. They may not want to hang out and have beers, but maybe they will go have a beer. But the reality of it is that the both sides did their jobs. They're going to get Bryan Kohberger to go in there, bend a knee, plead guilty to 4 counts of murder, spend the rest of his life in prison. and the defense did their job. They didn't put her client to death. You'd say by the defense side, that was a win because it wasn't going to be a not guilty. So it wasn't going to be a not guilty. Hate to break that to you. It's a tough case, ladies and gentlemen. And I love winning. I do. Hell, I just had a case in March, man. Wiretaps, co-defendant, testifying against the statements, still got a not guilty. So I love it. Okay. It is a lot of fun. It is a hoop, but there's no guarantees. And there were moments I'm like, oh, we're going down. This is not good. Ooh. I like to think my closing argument brought them over to our side, to the side with the white hats on, but you never know. So yeah, I think all the attorneys in that case were good. Jen Lowe, how are you? Hello. It has been a while. My gosh, what is that, like 5 years ago? I mean, Jen, it goes by so fast. But she was a great mod for us. I think we burned her out, though. I think we burned her out, but she was great. Thanks for coming back and saying hi, Jen Lowe. Appreciate that. Kelly, fabulous coverage as always. Thank you. We just try to bring you with the information we have and try to explain it through the facts and the law and a little bit of personal experience to explain why things are taking place. But yeah, it's definitely a situation where I guess there's always a possibility, but I didn't expect it today, where Frank comes in and he's like, "Hey, sir." Yeah, Frank. You don't have to call me sir, but thank you. He goes, plea bargain and Kohberger. I went, really? We need to confirm this. Let's go live. So thanks everybody for joining us. And thank you, Kelly, for saying you enjoy our coverage of it. Like I said, hopefully we try to explain it well enough and that we can provide everything out there. Jory wants to know, can they get FOIAs to see what's behind the gag already? Gag order should be going away here shortly, and hopefully that will become, for the most part, public knowledge. So we'll have to wait and see. All right, got one more call. Let's see who we've got. Mike, thanks for calling Crime Talk. How are you?
Okay, how about you?
Living the dream.
Yeah, nice dream.
Some days. How are you?
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to make a comment that I believe the defense was kind of shook by change of venue, getting a judge that's no nonsense, and it kind of backfired on them.
I cannot disagree with you. Judge, who was originally handling the case up there in Latah County, was certainly much more deferential to the defense. I think he was trying to do what he could to make sure everything appeared fair. Judge Hippler has made things appear, in my opinion. I didn't see much about the first judge, but I have a little bit of interest in Idaho personally, so I've been watching it. It's a little dark, sore on my opinion in Idaho, but you got to look beyond, the people there are actually really good people overall. So, I have no doubt in my mind. I've been up there during the Daybell trial. We went down there to his hometown. We flew in, checked it out. Everybody could tell we weren't from around there, so to speak, but they were very polite, very, very nice to us. They're all good people. I didn't meet anybody that was a bad one, at least from what I could tell.
Yeah.
And, it seems like most of the Idaho people are pretty good. It's all the transplants that seem to be causing all the trouble, Lori Vallow, Kohberger, not the natives, not the native, Idahoans. Is that how you pronounce it? But,
yeah, one good thing is like Californians, Washington, Oregon, a lot of them that are coming to Idaho are actually conservative. So maybe I shouldn't say that, but so they turn out to be pretty good people,
Sure. But yeah, I don't disagree with you. Judge Hippler, no nonsense type of guy, talked about it today in our program. We talked about, I've run into many Judge Hipplers over the years. They're good judges.
I think it made a big decision on what they did with their plea deal, I assume.
There's no doubt that the judge's decision on the motion to continue and the alternate suspect perpetrator thing, it had to have been the final moment, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to perfectly state, or the last drop into the barrel before the water flowed over. Because motions hearings are it's a watershed moment in most cases. It decides what facts are coming in, it decides the law that the court is going to apply. And Judge Hippler, I know some people are like, he's not fair. He rules against the defense. Listen, you obviously haven't been watching enough true crime to realize that. They always rule against the defense. That's why we're so surprised. They're being mean to the defendant. Well, maybe sometimes, but most of the time they're just following the law, and the law is not written in favor of the defendant. Okay, just the way it is. You got those constitutional rights, but for the most part, everything else is against the defendants.
So can I ask you one quick question?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't recall if it goes state by state, but if it's a hung jury on the murder trial, what's next in that case?
Well, if it did go to trial and it was a hung jury, then the prosecution could do it again. They could do it again in many times if they choose to do so. You would not go forward with the death penalty phase, obviously, if the jury had not reached a unanimous verdict at that point.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Nice show.
Thank you for calling. Thank you. All right. And just real quick, that last caller nailed it, because these motions hearings, they're defining moments. And this Judge Hippler, he laid down the law. And I don't have anything against Judge, the original judge in the case. He seemed very nice, but he seemed very deferential to Ann Taylor. And, she got her change of venue. Didn't quite turn out the way she expected it, because she thought she was going to get Judge, who I believe was retiring. So got Judge Hippler, very experienced judge there. And he don't play. Moves this case along, called BS when it was time to call BS. Said, hey, give me your best shot. Show me your proof for alternate suspect. We're not going to do this trial. We're going to do this pretrial. Show me what you got. And it fell flat. And he let him know. Last Friday's show, you can go check it out. We went through the entire opinion on both of those issues, alternate suspect and the motion to deny. And some people are like, he's being so mean. No. He's making an appellate record saying that they had nothing. And so all those, if Bryan Kohberger, assuming he pleads on Wednesday, enters a plea of guilty on Wednesday, he will have all of those issues, poof, go away. All those appellate issues, frankly, none of them stood any great chance. They were not great. They were creative, but they weren't exactly well-rooted in the law, and the defense knew it. But they were doing what they could. They were doing their jobs. And guess what? By them doing their jobs, flushed this out. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. From the time a case starts to the time that the case ends, whether through a guilty plea or trial, the truth or a pretty darn close version of it will come out. There's always going to be those outlier cases where, we can't prove that there was ever really this that took place. And my new example is just like that Air India, where 182 people or 168 people died, and there was one survivor. Everybody agrees the guy was on the plane. He survived, and nobody knows how the hell it happened. Now, if you follow the logic of some people say, well, if we can't recreate it, obviously it never happened. We're not even sure there was an accident. Those other 168 people didn't even die, did they now? There's just some things you can't necessarily explain. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, Scott, why with the alternate suspect, BK's defense not allowed to bring it in, but Karen Reed's defense were allowed to? What was the difference? Well, I'll be honest with you. It never should have been allowed in the Karen Reed case. I think the judge was intimidated by the defense attorneys and thought, well, if I let a little bit in, it'll be okay. But, the defense didn't even ask for the alternate suspect in the Karen Reed case last time. the trial where she was acquitted. Good for her. And the law in this particular case, for alternate suspect, you basically have to be able to show that person was there and could have committed the murder, not pure speculation and conjecture. And if you go to Friday's show, I go through this paragraph by paragraph, line by line, and you'll understand why. And then 2 weeks before that, we did the law of alternate suspect in Idaho. And it's just like I explained it here. You have to basically show that the person was directly involved in the crime. So much so that basically the judge should say, oh my God, let me go release your client because the real murderer is over there. And it didn't even come close. And Judge Hippler let them know that it didn't come close, and it failed miserably. And was it a defining moment? Probably was. Was Kohberger saying, oh, I'm not going to get a fair trial? No, you're going to get a fair trial. You're just going to get the result you don't necessarily want. And who knows what brought him around to it, but it did. Now I'm going to hold my breath until Wednesday when he actually enters a plea and the judge accepts his guilty plea. All right. Because something could blow up. I don't think it will, but it could. So I'm not going to go there, but let's just wait and see. I think it'll go through. All right. There's always a chance he changes his mind. You look like a little bitch, but reality of it is it'll more than likely go through. Although he already looks like, oh, you chickened out. Check it out. Didn't want to go to trial, huh, Brian? Thought you're going to lose, huh, Brian? Just the way it is. Just the way it is. And I've had clients where I'm like, really? You're not going to take a deal? Or you're going to take a deal? Really? I thought I didn't do this. This is a travesty of a mockery of a sham. You'll never plead guilty, right? And you're what? Like, so it is what it is, I guess. Let's see here. Do you think he will say he is innocent, but will plead guilty because he thought the jury may find him guilty? I hope not. And if he does, then the judge should say, you know what? I don't want to accept the plea of guilty from an innocent man to spend the rest of his life in prison. Who would want that? So unless you're going to admit that you did it, we'll have a trial. I hope that's what the judge says. And that's what I think the judge will do. You don't want any reason for, down the road, oh, my attorney twisted my arm, right? We talked about this early on, the colloquy that's going to take place. You know what you're doing. You're satisfied with your attorney. You're in the influence of any drugs, alcohol, or medication. Have you ever been treated for any mental illness? Are you on any medications right now? Does that medication affect your ability to understand what's going on here in the courtroom today? No, usually it just makes me feel better. Okay, here's the plea agreement. They're going to take death off the table. You plead guilty to these 5 charges, 4 counts of first-degree murder after deliberation, 1 count of burglary. You understand that? Any other promises, side deals, winks and nods made? Nope, Your Honor, that's it. Let me make sure you understand the rights you have. You have a right to enter a plea of not guilty. Set this matter for trial, which is scheduled to begin in August. You understand that? We'll do that. We got all the preparations made. So, there's no do-overs here. If you want your trial, now's the time to say you want your trial. If not, you understand that you'll be able to help your attorneys select a jury. And at a trial, the prosecution has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt to a unanimous jury. So that they all agree. If the prosecution failed to prove just one element of the offense, it would be their solemn oath and obligation to say not guilty. Do you understand that? Do you understand at trial, you have a right to present a defense, but you don't have to. You don't have to present any evidence whatsoever. At a trial, you have a right to subpoena witnesses. If they wouldn't come voluntarily, they could be subpoenaed by court order to show up. And they'll even pay for their travel expenses if you're indigent. Okay, y'all good with that? So you shouldn't have to worry about any witnesses coming to trial or not. If you need them, we'll get them here. Then he's going to say, you understand you have a right to testify or not to testify. And if you chose not to testify, I am going to instruct the jury that they cannot use your silence against you in any way whatsoever. Do you understand that? And that right to testify is your decision and yours alone, not your attorney's, not the prosecutor's, not mine, the judge, family member, anybody. It's a very personal decision. And if you chose not to testify, I would give that instruction that they couldn't use your silence against you. And you understand by pleading guilty, you give up any right to an appeal. Because if you went to trial and you lost, you have a right to an appeal. Not just because you didn't like the result, but you thought that maybe there was some error that was made that resulted in an unfair trial, that rose to such a level that it was an unfair trial. Mr. Kohberger, do you understand by pleading guilty, other than your right to have an attorney with you at all stages of these proceedings, you're giving up those rights? There'll be no trial. There'll be no jury. There'll be no making the prosecution present evidence to prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't have to put up any defense, obviously. There'll be no witnesses called on your behalf. Not that you'd be forced to do anything like that. There'll be no decision to testify, and there will be no appeal. Do you understand that? Is this what you want to do? Are you sure? Because that trial seems like a really cool thing to do. You sure you don't want to do it? You want to plead guilty? Are you pleading guilty because you are, in fact, guilty? Hopefully, the judge will then say, I need to establish a factual basis for the plea. Tell me in your own words what you did for the death of each of these young ladies and one gentleman. Hopefully, Bryan Kohberger will explain what he did, how he did it, and why he did it for the world to know. For the ultimate confession. A guilty plea is a confession, ladies and gentlemen. So don't say, oh, Bryan Kohberger was framed if this goes through. Bryan Kohberger, like Chris Watts, all the people, Chris Watts was innocent. Nope. Read the transcript. Wasn't. Pled guilty. People don't plead guilty to multiple homicides if they didn't do it. So if this goes through, please, no, Kohberger's innocent. Kohberger is framed. Kohberger was pressured. He's innocent. Whatever. A guilty plea is a confession, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that. So there you go. All right, Frank, one last chance. Any other callers? I think we're going to wrap it up. All right, we're going to double check, see if we got any. All right, no future callers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, breaking news. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't. Like if you do. Leave me a comment below. And obviously hit that little bell for notifications, because we're going to put up when we go live with the Kohberger guilty plea on Wednesday, assuming it comes to fruition. And remember, you can check us out anytime on Crime Talk. We've put up a daily show Monday through Friday with a weekly recap on Sundays as well. So thanks for joining us. If you're a regular subscriber, thank you for being here. If you're new to the channel, like I said, please subscribe. Come check us out. Hopefully you liked what we had to say. We just tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. Got no real agenda either way. We're not sponsored by one particular side or another. Just calling the way we see it. Truth, the law, the facts. That's the only thing that matters. So, all right. Thanks for joining us. Remember, the Constitution matters.
All right, lawyer.